I'm excited to introduce two people who are passionate about helping others to function with more ease in school. Ms. Marian Vessels is the director of the Mid-Atlantic ADA Center since 1996. She provides training and guidance on the Americans with Disabilities Act as it relates to employment, state and local governments, arts, and hospitality. Previously, she was the director of the Maryland Governor's Committee on Employment of People with Disabilities and the director of the Maryland Governor's Office of Individuals with Disabilities. Dr. Jeffrey Boyce is an attending cardiologist at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, the director of the POTS program since 2014, and a clinical professor of pediatrics at the University of Pennsylvania's Perelman Center of Medicine. Dr. Boyce has been caring for people with POTS for 14 years, longer than most doctors have known about POTS. And he has actually advocated on behalf of some of the younger people here today. He is highly respected and loved by his patients. We are grateful to have Ms. Vessels and Dr. Boyce here with us today. Please join with me in welcoming them.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Since we're getting a little bit of a late start, we want to make sure we get through our information. So we ask you to hold your questions until the end of the session, and we'll have a question and answer period. We're here to talk, or I'm going to be talking about ADA 504 and IDEA. Getting from here to there. You may remember this quote. Alice asked a Cheshire cat who was sitting in a tree, "What road do I take?" The cat asked, "Where do you want to go?" "I don't know," Alice answered. Then the cat said, "It really doesn't matter, does it?" We want to give you a road, an aspect of how to get from here to there, understanding the laws, and then we'll talk about application. So my role is to talk with you about what the laws are and how they can apply to your child or yourself. There's the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and it's an educational act that provides federal assistance to state and local government agencies and other entities to guarantee special education and services that are for eligible children with disabilities. I know many of you are very, very comfortable with IDEA, but what it does is have some real teeth to it. It provides something that you probably hear a lot about, which is FAPE, a free and appropriate public education in the least restricted environment, or people will say LRE, which means special classrooms or resources or embedded within a regular classroom. School districts are responsible for identifying and evaluating these students with disabilities at no cost to the student or the parent or the family. And this is really important because other laws don't provide that coverage. Parents must consent to the evaluation and placement decisions, which is why you have meetings that are mandated with an IDEA. Every IDEA student is required to have IEPs, which are individual education plans that are developed with the parents, teachers, and other specialists, including, I hope, the student with a disability. They're not required to be there, but I really hope that you consider and prepare the student to be a part of their IEP process and have a voice in the IEP process and not just have the adults make the decisions for them. The IDEA also requires special services from specially trained teachers. Again, special education teachers that are designed to be able to assist your student in being successful. IDEA covers children from age 3 to 21 in a K through 12 educational environment who are evaluated by a multidisciplinary team to be eligible within one of 13 very specific disability categories. And it's for these students who need that special education and related services. And it's important to know these categories of disabilities. And you'll see the categories are pretty specific: autism, deafness, deaf-blind, hearing impairments, mental retardation, although the law still says that word, we know it now commonly is ID intellectual disabilities, multiple disabilities, again, which is probably what we're talking about here today, orthopedic impairments, other health impairments, serious emotional disturbance, specific learning disabilities, speech or language impairments, traumatic brain injury, and visual impairments. So you can see it's a very, very broad spectrum. So it's going to cover lots of kids with very severe disabilities. Section 504, the Rehabilitation Act, is a law that's been in existence for many, many years, since 1973. It's a civil rights law, so it's a very, very different kind of application. And civil rights is very important in this discussion. It's not an Education Act law, like IDEA is. IDEA is very specific in that. Section 504 is very, very broad. It's designed to prohibit discrimination on the basis of disability in programs and activities, both public and private, that receive federal financial assistance. And that's key here for Section 504. It has to have federal dollars to be in effect for you to be concerned about it. So how does that apply to your children? It ensures that a children with a disability has an equal access to education. Remember I said civil rights. This is that piece of civil rights. The child may receive accommodations and modification within the school system. If the child has a disability does not adversely affect their educational performance, that child may not be eligible for special education under IDEA, but they are eligible under Section 504. So that's where Section 504 becomes really critical. Many times we see that there may be a child that enters the system as IDEA and then may transition into a 504 plan because they may not need the special education services anymore. Or, again, if a child doesn't have a severe enough disability to qualify for special education, Section 504, bless you, can be very, very important and critical in providing the necessary accommodations needed. Under Section 504, there aren't as many procedural safeguards for a child that IDEA has. So as an advocate, you really want to make sure that if your child is eligible for IDEA, that is where you go. Some people say, oh, I want 504 plan because I think that sounds better because they're trying maybe to integrate more. You have no procedural guidelines, or not to the extent that you're going to have under IDEA. IDEA is very, very specific. Section 504 is not. It's there, and it's a good tool, and you need to know about it. But IDEA is going to give you those structural safeguards. So who's covered under 504? It's anyone who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, someone who has a record of that impairment, or is regarded as having such an impairment. And regarded might be someone who has a history. It could be, history would be under the record. But it would maybe somebody has a facial scar, and someone says, oh, you're severely disabled, and treat them as such, even though it doesn't affect any major life activity. The Americans with Disabilities Act. Again, a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination solely on the basis of the disability in employment, state and local government, places of public accommodation, and telecommunications and transportation as well. Again, ADA is a civil rights piece of legislation. So under the ADA, a person who is eligible to receive services, any child, getting educational services, who has a physical or mental impairment, which is one of those major life activities, has the record of, or is regarded as having one. And does this definition sound familiar? It's the same as 504. ADA was built on 504 because 504 happened in 1973. The ADA came into effect in 1990. Okay? What does it do in the educational system? It eliminates barriers that prevent a student from full participation. One of the problems here for people using the ADA is that there's no mandatory testing. The student has to self-identify. So they have to say, I have a disability under the ADA. And then that application of removing barriers and allowing people inclusion then happens. Remember I talked about FAPE just briefly? Free and appropriate public education. It's defined to mean special education related services. These are specially designed services at no cost to the parents to specifically meet the unique needs of that student. And again, it's individual. It's not like, well, all students who have POTS, whatever, are going to be treated the same way. It's individualized assessment and individualized services. States are required to provide a full educational opportunity to all children with disabilities. Again, we need to prepare that IEP. It's a specific document. It requires that meeting that I would hope you bring your student with you and well participated and directed. FAPE and 504 are not really necessarily connected. As I again said, 504 is a civil rights law. It doesn't have the same teeth that IDEA has. So a student with disabilities may be defined as needing regular or special education services under 504, even if they are not provided specific special education classes. 504 does require the plan, although many written documents like IDEA has are not required. So under IDEA you have an aggressive plan, meetings, and aggressive requirement. Section 504 requires a plan, doesn't really define it as much, and there's not as many requirements. Under the ADA, it applies to non-sectarian schools, which 504 does not. IDEA does. It provides a little bit more protection for students that have a 504 plan, but it really requires reasonable modification for students with disabilities. And again, both public and private. IDEA is the only one that has funding. There are tax deductions under the ADA, but IDEA is the only one that has funding. Due process under IDEA, very specific standards that are delineated for impartial hearings, for the evaluation. Under 504, you must have impartial hearings, but the details aren't as specific under IDEA, so there's not as much mandate there. And under the ADA, there is no due process. It's a complaint-driven process and no mandatory evaluation or procedures. You can go to your educational entity, and you can go all the way up to the U.S. Department of Education and file a complaint, but there's no due process under the ADA. I have provided some resources. The PowerPoint is in your thumb drive. If you have any questions at all about the ADA, and I'll have material up here on the table that I'd love for you to take home with you. I've got a fact sheet that lays out, and it was also included in the CD, that lays out the comparison of all three laws. And this is our center, and we look forward to your connecting. Give us a call if you've got any questions. We make sure you get to the right entity. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Dr. Boyce. I'll give you that.
All right. Good afternoon. Hope everyone's doing all right. And I hope lunch doesn't make everyone too sleepy. So a couple of disclosures. One is that Dysautonomia International has actually paid a summer stipend to a college student who is working on my database and helping to make that complete. He's actually here as well, so I'm thrilled that he's able to do that. And also the other disclosure is I copied or modified, stole, a bunch of these from Dysautonomia International and other support group sites. All right, so let's talk about POTS patients, at least with the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, because that's where I work and that's what I'm used to. We want, at our institution, we want patients to be as close to their pre-POTS life as possible, right? So that means being with friends, participating in sports, doing their activities of daily living, and that means taking out the trash and cleaning your room, right? And then also getting back to school and getting an education. So why attend school? Well, it's legally mandated. Come on now. It actually prepares you, as my 20-year-old daughter says, I adulted today, right? It prepares you to adult, okay? You get to see and or make friends, hopefully. It is a gateway to extracurricular activities that keeps you active, gives you access to a gym to work out, which we all know is important in the therapy for POTS, and you need it for college and for life. So, you know, most everyone gripes about school, but a lot of students with POTS actually enjoy it, right? Because they're good students. A lot of them have historically been good students. They enjoy learning. They enjoy seeing their friends. It gets them out of the house, God knows, and then it gets them functioning at least somewhat independently. And it's a symbol of trying to get back to baseline as well, right? So why do we need to consider accommodations? Well, so in the kids with POTS, they're just not able, in some cases, to do everything that a child without POTS can do, okay? So their symptoms can be overwhelming, right? They have fatigue and brain fog, they have dizziness, headaches, nausea and abdominal pain. And so, and so that kind of keeps people from being able to get information in while they're at school. And then the other reason that we need to consider accommodations is the schools sometimes just don't get it, okay? And we see the nodding heads in the audience, right? So, you know, there's a lack of understanding amongst the teachers and the administrators about POTS, and so what they'll do is they won't make any modifications of expectations for the students to be able to get through school. So, at where we are, and you may see this at your home institution if you have multiple providers taking care of your kids. On the one hand, we have a pediatric headache program, and they specifically discourage being out of school at all. Okay, they want you to, you know, quote, normalize your life, and they want you to work through or at least minimize the pain. Okay. However, on the other hand, we do utilize accommodations, and for starters, obviously, the patients have more symptoms than just headaches, okay? And in my view, it makes no sense to sit in a class, distracted by bad symptoms, falling asleep, having information bounce off your forehead onto the desk in front of you. It's not getting into your head where it needs to be. So what is available? So as Marion so eloquently put out, the 504, where an IEP is certainly part of that, and her presentation was much more complete for that. And not always, and I think one of the things to keep in mind is folks who go to private schools are not mandated to provide this, so keep that in mind. So what kind of accommodations do we talk about? And this is going to be the laundry list, but hopefully it'll be a helpful laundry list. And again, this is, I copped a lot of this stuff, but it's really sort of typical things. Some of them are obvious, some of them not so much. Unlimited access to water or other fluids, non-alcoholic, of course, please. And then unlimited access to the restroom. Access to salty snacks outside of lunch. Accompaniment to the restroom between classes with a buddy as needed. The ability to go to the nurse for as needed medication administration. More time to transit between classes and more time for homework and testing. Having 2 sets of school texts, one for school and one for home, so you're not dragging extra weight around. Excuse me. Use of an elevator key. And then if the patient or if the student is excessively fatigued or dizzy, allow 15 minutes of a supervised break in a cool, quiet environment. Sometimes the nurse's office isn't quite quiet, and so the library or a teacher's office can be helpful that way. Preferential seating, so that the student is placed as close to the teacher and or an exit as needed as possible. And then prioritizing core academics. So if the student doesn't have the energy for a full day, scheduling the required classes together. Note the spoon theory, right? Allowing students to keep their cell phone at school for emergencies. Elimination of physical education or participation in an adaptive PE class. And one of the things that we've been able to do is we've been able to get some of the schools to substitute the Levine protocol, the Dallas protocol for exercise, in place of PE. And actually one patient was put into just adaptive PE. And what adaptive PE ended up being was she got to go to the weight room. So she's like, perfect. This is better than hanging out doing softball or stuff out in the cold or in the heat or whatever. She worked out and did the Dallas protocol in the weight room where she needed to be. Forbearance for frequent tardiness and or absence. Evaluation by a school counselor or a psychologist on a weekly basis to assess the student's needs. And I think I can't stress enough the psychological stressors that are affiliated with POTS, right? I sort of think of POTS like the Chinese water torture. You know something bad's going to happen. You don't know when it's going to happen, but you know it's going to be at a really inopportune time. You're taking a test, you're out with your friends, you're doing something you enjoy, and it, in and of itself, can lead to anxiety, can lead to depression with a chronic illness. And so having a psychologist on board from a counseling standpoint, giving you more tools in your toolbox to be able to manage these issues, really important. And then certainly apprising the child of school and after-school activities and allowing the student to participate to their level of ability, even if they're homebound, okay? So just because they're homebound doesn't mean that they shouldn't be able to get to school and do some activities. Now, does that mean that they need to, if they're homebound, they need to be, out in the heat doing marching band? Well, I think within reason, right? We have to kind of be smart about it. So some other accommodations, organizing the schedule so classrooms are near each other and near the student's locker as available. Fire drills and school evacuations can certainly exacerbate symptoms, so they might need an adult buddy to kind of help them. Allowing talks to be recorded or have a transcriber or have a teacher give the class notes to the student. The ability to use a calculator in math. Key locks or having a name combo instead of a numerical combination lock. I hadn't really thought about that one, but that makes a lot of sense, right? Allowing compensatory seating positions to combat venous pooling. So, scrunching up your legs, sitting cross-legged, sitting on your knees, that kind of thing. Also allowing for frequent stretches and moving around. Even on an airplane, if my patients say, well, can I go on an airplane? I'm like, yeah, you can do that. Make sure you hydrate like crazy, but get up and do a lap, right? Because from the talks this morning, from what Dr. Grubb was talking about, that venous pump, that muscular pump in your legs is so important to get that blood back up into your core and to your brain. Use of a portable fan for those folks who have heat intolerance. If they have cold intolerance, dressing it in layers. If sometimes strong odors can worsen symptoms, so the ability to leave class, like in chemistry class or whatnot. And then wearing sunglasses and or earplugs if they have light or sound sensitivity. Now the earplug thing we have to be within reason, right? Because the teacher's actually trying to teach, so you get the point. So what do you do with the actual school day? Well, you can do partial day school. And so the mornings are typically worst so for POTS patients, so we like to start late morning or early afternoon. Sometimes you do just one period at the end of the day, and then do that for a week or two, and then just keep adding on periods progressively. Tutoring, homebound education, IEP with placement of instruction conducted in the home, and the house, and cyber school. There are various opportunities. When giving this information to the school, having a letter that explains POTS and its symptoms and its management is very important. I have a template that I use in my electronic health record that creates a letter for my patients, straight up. And in that I say, creativity, flexibility, communication, and understanding in the management of specific issues that may arise in the care of this child is necessary. And what I say about this letter is I say, use this letter like the cafeteria menu. Pick and choose the things you need off of it. Some of it, all of it, none of it, okay? Sometimes the schools just need to know, my child has POTS, but he or she's doing okay for now. And then reevaluate that every 3 months. So most of the school systems my patients and families have dealt with have been pretty good. But not all of them are, and there are some that are way difficult to deal with, and they don't understand the POTS despite a letter, they don't believe it, or they don't want to take the effort or spend the money, straight up, okay? And we have the heads nodding there too. So when dealing with them, first be nice, firm but nice. Try to negotiate and explain, involve your physician if you need to, and if all else fails, lawyer up. And there are education lawyers out there that can be very helpful in helping you realize what these schools are trying to suppress. There are some resources out there for learning, about learning. One is the Patient and Training Information Centers from the patientcenterhub.org. Another one is Rights Law. Both of these are free. There's a lot of great information on these. And then college is coming, right? So the kids get older, we want them to get out of the house. So the first thing you need to do is take advanced testing, SATs, ACTs, APs. And there's accommodations for them too, and we have a letter for that too. So homebound testing setting if needed, late start or afternoon or evening, up to 2 hours only or less per day, multiple testing sessions over multiple days or a maximum number of days, extra time for testing, up to double time. Because, God, these tests are so boring. Anyway, so, sometimes we can help with this. Other things to do, the ability to take food, fluid and medication during the examination, extended breaks, stopping the clock breaks, extra breaks, and the use of a computer to complete the essay portions of testing. We actually had to remind the College Board and the ACT of the Americans with Disabilities Act because students with POTS do have an established disability as defined. Do start the process early. Have a strong IEP or 504 statement prior to your testing. And so now we've gotten through high school, right? And you've graduated and your parents are really freaked out because, he or she is going to be on their own, they can't go far away, what about medical care? So the next thing I'm going to say to you, I'm saying with a lot of love and a lot of respect, cut the umbilical cord, okay? You guys as parents have had to advocate for your child for months to years before the diagnosis, after the diagnosis. And I get it, we get it. But these kids need to learn to be adults. Remember, we as parents, and I can say we too, because I have a 20-year-old and a 12-year-old, our goal is to raise our children so that they can be independent adults, right? And so they need to learn to do so, and they will fail. And that's okay. Hopefully it'll be minor failures because major failures are like, big setback. It does make them more capable later. And they need to learn to manage the POTS themselves. In talking with my pediatric POTS colleagues around the country, what we find is the patients that deal with POTS, they manage the POTS themselves. do better, okay? And so that's understanding that balance between POTS and life, all right? So in some aspects, college is actually kind of easier. You know, you're older, so the kids have more self-awareness of owning the disease. They're more aware of their own body and their own self. They have more recovery time between classes. You're not doing 7 classes a day, 5 days a week. You got a couple hours here, a couple hours there. That works harder, don't get me wrong. And so they have also concepts given in larger chunks. So it's just a different way of processing. The colleges can also be easier to work with. They have a disabilities office, but do talk with them ahead of time to make sure that they'll play ball, because some of them are not, you know, on that. And you are paying them, by the way, so yeah, you know, your money speaks. But again, that can be variable. From a college standpoint, some of the accommodations that we use or we recommend can be a first floor dorm room, air conditioning, private bathroom, the ability to tape record lectures, proximity to the dining hall, and then use some of the other school accommodations we talked about before, realizing that the 504 and the IEP does not follow you to college, but the ADA protection does. And no, you don't need a permanent bathroom pass. Here's a couple of resources that you can use. A couple from DI's website, also Dysautonomia Youth Network of America has a really good one. All right, there we go. Hope I finished on time. And I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and take questions. Thanks. Okay, good. So I'm going to just move over here.
Okay. In the back.
Yeah, if you could go back to the slide that talked about the working-day school.
Yep.
And tutor and homebound and IEP placement at home. Oh, yeah, there it is. Yeah, and let me just say welcome to Virginia, because we don't do, I've spent a lot of time on homebound. And partial day school, I mean, Fairfax, Loudoun, Prince William County, this is not what it's not in their wheelhouse.
Oh, there's a lot of stuff that's not in a lot of school systems' wheelhouse.
So, I mean, like, a lot of tools would really be helpful, but I think a lot of parents, when their children are new to POTS, they really don't know how to come up with this as a solution. And, you know, we've got many, many cases here, and there's a lot of great POTS professionals in the DC area, no question about it. But to push our ability to do the things that you've been able to do with your patients would be a humongous advance. And I'd be really interested in how do we crack that nut. I actually was a couple of months ago at our version of PTI is called PTSI here in Virginia. And I met with some of the Virginia Department of Education staff. I would love for them to be here, because I don't think, they're not getting it at that PTI level.
Sure.
I think we need to be able to come up with a connection. I don't quite know what it is, but
I think you have to realize that there's a couple of factors at play here. There are numerous, thousands and thousands of school systems across the country, right? And so with numerous different administrators and leaders that don't always understand what is required of them. They don't understand the laws. They don't understand what they have to do. And even if they do understand it, some of them don't want to do it because, as I mentioned before, because of the money issues, because of the work and that kind of stuff. And I've literally had patients and families specifically lied to by school administrators who have tried to kind of confuse and befuddle and obfuscate, that's a good word, the information so they don't find it, right? So something like those two websites, the Rights Law and the Parent Hub, are information that at minimum can arm you. And different school systems are going to do different things, right? So, for example, I mentioned cyber school. There's some school systems where cyber school is actually really fairly robust. There's others where they'll put a couple of tests on there and say, or a couple of kind of crummy classes on cyber school and say, there, we fixed it. Now you have cyber school, which is worthless, right? So how can you fix it? And I want Marion to sort of kick in on this too, but at minimum, certainly an education lawyer, again, can kind of force the issue, but you don't want to get into that adversarial relationship if you don't have to.
But it sounds like you started some of the dialogue. You went to PTSI, you went to your Parent Training Center. Make sure that they are on the same page with you and have the background and supports that you need. And the best thing that you're doing right now is you're learning about what the requirements are, which law to use, how to use them effectively. Become well armed. Unfortunately, you are your best advocate. You need to know what the law says for sure, because you need to know what basis you have. Secondarily, you need to know what it is you're fighting for. What specific things are going to work for your child. Find out what the law says about those accommodations. And it could be IDEA, ADA, 504, all three. I mean, it could be any combination of things. But then continue through the process. I agree, you don't want to lawyer up too fast, because then you're, quite honestly, what we've seen is you're not going to get anywhere fast. You may get what you want, but it may take you years to do it.
Right. Let me follow up. I have been to Pete Wright's seminar, and I have talked to him about this kind of issue specifically. And I said, where you have a situation where a student, there's uncertainty, because I think you had the right phrase, I forget how you put it, but like, I know when my daughter is going to start the school year, there will be a time she gets an infection. It'll take her long to recover. She'll miss serious periods of school. I can't tell you when,
Right.
but when the virus comes, that will happen. We did find a great lawyer in Manassas that did ultimately get us a different placement. So we were a pretty good storm that way. My daughter is now through it, but I am still very concerned about the structure that leaves behind. And as much as I would like to, work with the law people more, I don't really think it's quite there yet. So, but I do appreciate the advice, because I agree. You don't, it's so hard to deal and navigate with the illness and all the treatments for your kid, and then to have to go to the next level to figure out the schools is very, very difficult. And I have a lot of horrible thoughts about the College Board, I'll say for another time.
Yeah. Well, I think the whole POTS thing you didn't sign up for, and then, oh, by the way, as an extra added bonus, here's the school garbage, right? I mean, it's like, thanks a lot. Like, you just added insult to injury.
And I'd like to mention that it is in the wheelhouse of Dysautonomia International. If you can secure, or you've got a relationship with your Board of Education or anybody who is in charge of filling an in-service day, Lauren Stiles is more than happy to come out to your schools, provide the necessary persons to come out and educate your school nurses, your school 504 staff, your school IDP staff, to educate them about POTS and intermittent homebound programs and the other ways of getting around that whole mess that happens. So reach out to DI if you've got a way to get something set up, or if they're even interested in the dialogue.
And that's what you get when you get a great, patient and family advocacy group, right?
I'm not sure if this is going to come out right, but
I'll just say it.
half the problem is that we don't know what's right and how to educate our children. I mean, we're put on this planet as a parent, you don't get a manual
Right.
for your kid, and each kid's different. And for me, in my case, I have 3 kids with POTS, and my youngest is like completely a mess in every way. And I don't even know how to ask the school to provide me for what is right for him, because I don't know. And we've tried things, and they put him in therapeutic schools, and I'm getting things given to me, but I don't even know if that's the right placement. So like that's, I think, the hardest thing for a parent, not understanding, and then not knowing the laws to get us to,
I'll let you start and then I'll.
right.
That's
Yeah,
good.
right. No, that's you're right. Again, it's like it's like the age of the home computer. No one realized when we got a home computer that we were all going to have to be mini IT specialists, right? Now you have a child and you have to be mini education specialist, although now you have to be a maxi education specialist because your kids really have more than just the typical school issues. Um,
Yes.
Oh, and that too. And that too, right? Oh, and that too. Okay. So, I think the easy thing to start with, obviously, is the physical aspects of things. So, what does I gave you the laundry list, right? So, what do you know your child needs on a routine basis? So, we know that he or she needs
Do
to.
well in the morning, but the
Okay.
school may not be able to accommodate later classes. So like, even though you know kind of.
So ask for intermittent homebound, where they're just going to school in the afternoon.
But I mean, then you don't know the law as a parent to balance what you think may, if it's not offered, if they're not giving you things, schools don't just.
They're not going to volunteer
They
it.
are not. That's exactly it. That's why. I mean, I hate to say it, but and this is what Marion has been saying is that's why you have to yet again learn all this stuff to advocate.
So where,
Because
how?
Go to the
those-
parent,
those-
where are
the-
you from?
New Jersey.
yeah,
Go to your parent training center. We've got resources on the PowerPoint. They will help you walk through because they're staffed by parents of kids with disabilities who know your state law, who know the federal laws, and maybe haven't know your jurisdictional educational facility. And they will then help you understand the milieu and how it is. Call them. It's very easy. It's the first step that you need to do to understand the complexity of what they are required to do and understand what your child's needs are and then what kind of accommodations there can be. And the PTI will help you, DI will help you, your doctor may be able to, but don't count on it because they don't necessarily know. You're not going to have, everybody's not going to have a Dr. Boris. But those,
she does, and I still don't know what all to do.
oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
So,
Yeah. So I
but
mean,
those are options.
Well, I mean, and even with even with me on the phone talking to the school administration, I mean, it's like,
Ships in the night.
oh yeah.
Can I just make a comment? I'm actually a pediatrician in Northern Virginia, and I think it really depends on your school district and how willing they are. I haven't had that much trouble in Franklin County, believe it or not. That's because of the Lyme disease. And so they're so aware of Lyme. They'd rather have partial homebound than full homebound. They always would like that. But again, it just depends.
Everyone?
And I think the
Yep.
other thing, speaking to educating doctors, is that, you can't go in there and say, well, you need to this and this, blah, blah, because again, you're going to get that adversarial relationship. Just, going in there and, just because we're pediatricians doesn't mean we know the educational laws. Doesn't mean that we even know about POTS or some of the other weirdness. And so I actually learned about this from a patient. She brought it to me. I'm like, that's weird. And so then I looked into it. So I think having a medical provider that you can have an honest, conversation with, you feel like they're listening to you, that they're, I think I'll go check that out, see what I can find out. That's going to be your best advocate to get this thing started, because there have been times where I had actually called up school administrators, and I got it back down, because then I can say, no, it's this, this, and this, and you have to do this, because I had kids with special needs, so I didn't know the laws. So I think that's going to be a really strong advocate in your corner if you can get your doctor or your medical provider on board.
And that's actually a good point. I think, a lot of times the general pediatricians, if you're followed by a general pediatrician as well, hopefully your child is, the pediatricians are also going to be dealing with kids who have ADD and other specific learning disabilities, and so they actually, that's a great point, they may actually be even more familiar with your local jurisdiction laws. I think
We
have
are out of time.
We're out of time.
I've got some materials here that have the comparison of the three laws. It's on your thumb drive as well, but I've got hard copies. If you'd like information about getting information on the ADA, I've got brochures up here we'd be happy to share with you. And we'll be around for the next 10 minutes to answer questions in between sessions.
One thing about my talk, I think for whatever reason the file with my talk got corrupted, so I gave a new file. It's on this computer, and so hopefully we can get it to the families.
We will, everything will be posted online after the conference on our
Perfect.
website, so everybody will have access to it.
Great, perfect.
I want to thank both our speakers very much.